The Duggar family once embodied what many Americans believed to be the perfect reality TV image. A wholesome Christian household with traditional values, a seemingly endless supply of smiling children, and a message of faith and family unity. Their show, 19 Kids and Counting, became one of TLC's biggest franchises, running for years and pulling in millions of viewers who were fascinated by this unique family. But behind that carefully polished image was a storm of secrets, scandals, and legal battles. By the time TLC finally pulled the plug, it wasn't just about ratings. It was about lawsuits, investigations, and a family empire collapsing under the weight of its own hypocrisy. This is the story of the lawsuits that changed everything, the hidden abuse, the courtroom drama, and the shocking downfall of Josh Duggar, the man at the center of it all, the secrets that couldn't stay buried. The darkest chapter in the Duggar family's history began long before the world knew their names, long before their smiling faces and devout lifestyle became household fixtures on reality television. What fans would one day learn is that beneath the image of purity and perfection, a devastating secret was being quietly hidden within the walls of the Duggar home. According to later police documents and family statements, Josh Duggar, the eldest son, was accused of engaging in inappropriate behavior towards several of his younger sisters during their childhood. These incidents, deeply traumatic in nature, took place in the early 2000s, at a time when the family was not yet famous but already living under the strict and highly conservative values they often preached. At first, these allegations never reached law enforcement. Instead of reporting the behavior, Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar, the parents, admitted that they handled the situation internally. They claimed they turned to private discipline, religious counseling, and advice from close family friends, including figures connected to their church community. In their minds, they believed these measures were sufficient, that repentance and prayer could resolve what had happened. But it wasn't enough. This decision to keep the matter private not only denied the girls proper protection, but also ensured that Josh remained in the home, surrounded by his younger siblings, for years. It created an environment where secrecy prevailed and accountability was absent. The silence surrounding these incidents would ultimately cast a long shadow, one that could never be fully erased. The tip that changed everything. By 2006, the Duggars were gaining regional attention. They had appeared in media segments highlighting their unusually large family, and they were preparing for what would soon become their national reality TV career on TLC. To the outside world, they were on the cusp of fame. Inside their home, however, the weight of unspoken secrets loomed. That fragile facade cracked when an anonymous tip reached the Arkansas Department of Human Services hotline. A tipster, reportedly connected to the family's scheduled appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show, raised concerns about Josh Duggar's past conduct within the household. Harpo Studios, Oprah's production company, passed this information to authorities. This time, the matter could not remain hidden. The Springdale Police Department and Washington County officials opened a formal investigation. On December 12, 2006, several Duggar children were interviewed at the Children's Safety Center in Springdale, Arkansas. The interviews supported the allegations, with multiple sisters speaking about inappropriate behavior that had taken place years earlier. Josh himself also acknowledged some of this behavior when questioned. Legal roadblocks. In early 2007, a family in need of services petition was filed in Washington County Juvenile Court. This type of petition is not a criminal charge. It is designed as a family court mechanism meant to intervene in situations where children may need protection or additional support. But by the time investigators were formally involved, there was little they could do. Most of the incidents had occurred years earlier, and the statute of limitations for prosecution had already expired. In other words, the law no longer allowed prosecutors to file criminal charges against Josh for the abuse. The case was effectively closed. The Duggar children remained at home under Jim Bob and Michelle's supervision, and no criminal accountability ever followed. For the family, this meant survival. At least in the short term, they could move forward without the crushing weight of a criminal case against their eldest son. And with their national reality show looming, they had every incentive to keep the matter buried. And buried it stayed. For nearly a decade, nothing surfaced. 19 Kids and Counting premiered on TLC, catapulting the Duggars to fame. Millions tuned in to watch their daily lives, their strict courtship rules, and their growing family. To viewers, they represented an idealized version of conservative Christian values, modest, devoted, and pure. But the police records never vanished. They sat quietly in the background, waiting for the moment when secrecy would no longer protect the family. The secret resurfaces. By 2015, the Duggars were among TLC's biggest stars. But everything unraveled when those long-buried police records were exposed through Freedom of Information Act requests. Media outlets obtained the documents revealing what had happened years earlier. Josh had molested his sisters, his parents had chosen silence, and law enforcement had been unable to act because of time limits. The public outrage was immediate and explosive. Josh's carefully crafted image as a devout husband, father, and Christian activist crumbled overnight. Jim Bob and Michelle's decision to protect their son rather than report him was seen as betrayal, not only of their daughters, but of the very values they claimed to uphold. TLC had no choice but to cancel 19 Kids and Counting. The Duggars' world of secrecy had finally collapsed, and the family could no longer control the narrative. Lasting consequences. The resurfacing of the abuse allegations marked the beginning of the Duggar family's long public downfall. In the years that followed, lawsuits, scandals, and even criminal charges against Josh would further erode the empire that once seemed untouchable. But the foundation of that collapse lies here, in this first chapter. The secret abuse, the decision to handle it privately, and the silence that allowed it to fester. What was once hidden inside the Duggar household ultimately became national news, exposing not just the actions of one family member, but the choices of an entire household that prioritized image over accountability. The records may have been filed away in 2007, but the truth never disappeared. And when it finally came to light, it reshaped the Duggar legacy forever. The fall of the Duggar image. When the Duggar family exploded onto TLC with 19 Kids and Counting, viewers were introduced to what seemed like America's most wholesome household. Week after week, millions tuned in to watch Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar raise their massive family under the banner of conservative Christian values. To the public eye, they were a paragon of purity, modest clothing, strict courtship rules, and endless smiling children. The message was clear. This family lived by faith and discipline, and the world admired them for it. But behind the carefully staged image, a secret was waiting, a secret that would eventually destroy the Duggar empire. In 2015, that secret came crashing into the open. Media outlets, through Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests, obtained the long-buried Springdale police reports. What those documents revealed shocked the nation. Years earlier, Josh Duggar, the eldest son, had molested multiple sisters while they were young. Even more damning, his parents, Jim Bob and Michelle, had chosen silence over accountability, handling the matter privately instead of reporting it to law enforcement. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. For years, Josh had crafted an image as a devout husband, father, and outspoken conservative activist, often making appearances at political events and family values organizations. Overnight, that image shattered. TLC first suspended, then officially canceled 19 Kids and Counting, unable to reconcile its wholesome brand with the reality of what had happened behind closed doors. Fans felt betrayed, critics pounced, and the media frenzy left the Duggars scrambling for damage control. But as devastating as this revelation was, it was only the beginning of the family's legal saga. The Danica Dillon lawsuit. In late 2015, just months after the molestation scandal broke, Josh Duggar faced another public humiliation, this time in federal court. Danica Dillon, an adult film performer, filed a civil lawsuit against him, alleging that he had violently assaulted her during a sexual encounter in 2014. Dillon's claims were graphic and disturbing. According to her filing, Josh had not only paid for sex, but had become physically aggressive, leaving her bruised, shaken, and traumatized. She accused him of civil battery and sought damages for the harm she said she endured. The lawsuit painted a grim picture of Josh as someone living a double life. To the public, he was still presenting himself as a faithful Christian husband and father, the face of a family built on conservative morality. In private, Dillon alleged he was indulging in dangerous behavior that revealed an entirely different side of him, one marked by secrecy, hypocrisy, and abuse. What made Dylan's lawsuit even more explosive was its timing. Just weeks earlier, Josh had already been exposed in another scandal. His name appeared on the leaked database of Ashley Madison, the infamous website that promoted extramarital affairs. The revelation that Josh, a married man, an outspoken advocate for family values, had been secretly registered on a site for cheaters shattered his credibility further. Dylan's lawsuit, piled on top of that revelation, created the image of a man who had lived a life of deception for years. Legal battles and damage control Josh's legal team wasted no time in striking back. They aggressively fought the lawsuit, calling Dylan's claims opportunistic and lacking substance. His attorneys argued that she was seeking publicity and financial gain by targeting someone who had already fallen from grace. They pointed to her public interviews about the allegations, suggesting that her willingness to discuss them undermined her credibility. For months, the case played out in legal filings, generating headlines and further embarrassing the Duggar family. But it never went to trial. By early 2016, both parties reached an agreement, and the lawsuit was voluntarily dismissed. Court records suggest that a confidential settlement was likely reached, though no details were ever disclosed. For Josh, the dismissal meant one less legal battle to fight. But for his public image, and for the Duggar brand as a whole, the damage was permanent. Even without a trial, the mere existence of Dylan's allegations was enough to cement the idea that Josh Duggar had been living a destructive double life. The end of the Duggar brand. By this point, TLC had no way to salvage the Duggar franchise. The family that had once symbolized purity and morality had become synonymous with scandal and hypocrisy. Viewers who once tuned in to watch the wholesome chaos of a large family now associated the Duggar name with abuse, deception, and lawsuits. The cancellation of 19 Kids and Counting marked the end of an era, but it was not the end of the Duggars' legal troubles. In the years to come, more lawsuits, investigations, and ultimately criminal charges would continue to unravel the family's reputation. But 2015 stands as the year when the Duggar facade crumbled. From the unsealed police reports to the Ashley Madison scandal and Danica Dillon's lawsuit, the carefully constructed image of America's most famous Christian family collapsed under the weight of truth. What remained was not a paragon of purity, but a cautionary tale of secrecy, denial, and the devastating cost of a double life. The Duggar sisters sue for privacy. In May 2017, four of Josh's sisters, Jill Dillard, Jessa Seawald, Jinger Vuolo, and Joy Anna Forsyth, filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Springdale, Washington County, and several officials. Their claim? That the release of police records in 2015 had violated their privacy as child sexual abuse victims. The sisters alleged that officials failed to properly protect their identities when responding to FOIA requests. While the documents were partially redacted, the released reports still contained enough details, ages, family relationships, and context that the public could easily identify the victims. They sued for invasion of privacy, public disclosure of private facts, and outrage. The case dragged on for nearly 5 years with complex motions and appeals. Finally, in February 2022, a federal court ruled against them. The judge determined that the officials had acted within the law when releasing the documents and that they were protected by immunity. In other words, even if harm had been caused, the government employees could not be held legally responsible. For the sisters, it was another devastating blow. They had been forced to relive their trauma on the national stage, only to see their case dismissed without trial. The ruling highlighted a painful conflict: the balance between government transparency under FOIA and the privacy rights of abuse victims. The final collapse of Josh Duggar. If the lawsuits of 2015 and 2017 cracked the Duggar family's carefully cultivated image, the final collapse came in 2021 when the most devastating scandal yet thrust them back into national headlines. This time, there would be no settlements, no dismissed filings, and no public relations spin strong enough to protect the family brand. What happened in 2021 marked the permanent downfall of Josh Duggar and, by extension, the Duggar empire. The arrest. On April 29, 2021, federal agents with the Department of Homeland Security arrested Josh Duggar in Arkansas. The charges were chilling: receiving and possessing child sexual abuse material, CSAM. Investigators alleged that Josh had downloaded and viewed highly graphic images and videos of children being exploited, material that Homeland Security officials described as among the worst they had ever seen in their careers. The news shocked even those who were already aware of Josh's troubling past. The earlier molestation scandals and lawsuits had destroyed his reputation, but this was different. This was a federal criminal case involving digital forensics, damning evidence, and the full weight of the justice system. Josh was arraigned in federal court and entered a plea of not guilty. But almost immediately, the details emerging from prosecutors painted a grim picture. The evidence. According to investigators, the material was traced directly to computers at Josh's used car dealership in Arkansas. Federal agents testified that they discovered downloads of CSAM on the business's network, linked to peer-to-peer file-sharing programs. But what tied the evidence so directly to Josh was the digital trail. Forensic experts presented data showing that the downloads occurred at times that matched Josh's own schedule and phone activity. For example, while the files were being accessed, Josh's personal phone pinged from the same location. His online accounts and physical presence overlapped perfectly with the incriminating activity. The defense attempted to argue that someone else could have used the system, that perhaps an employee or outsider had gained access. But prosecutors dismantled that claim, pointing to timestamps, user logins, and overlapping metadata that all pointed back to Josh. The digital evidence, they argued, was not just circumstantial, it was undeniable. The trial. The trial began in November 2021 in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Over the course of several days, prosecutors presented forensic reports, witness testimony, and expert analysis. They emphasized not only that the material was found on Josh's devices, but also the horrifying nature of the content itself. Seasoned Homeland Security agents testified that the files included depictions of children so young and vulnerable that even veteran investigators described them as the worst of the worst. For jurors, the weight of that testimony left little room for doubt. The defense, meanwhile, tried to cast reasonable doubt. They claimed the government's investigation had gaps, that others could have planted or accessed the files, and that the prosecution was unfairly trying to connect Josh's past behavior with the present charges. They asked the jury to separate his teenage molestation scandals from the federal case at hand. But the jury wasn't persuaded. On December 9th, 2021, after just a short period of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on both counts, receiving CSAM and possessing CSAM. The sentencing on May 25, 2022, Judge Timothy Brooks sentenced Josh Duggar to 151 months in federal prison, equivalent to 12 years and 7 months. In addition, the court imposed 20 years of supervised release, ensuring that even after his prison term, Josh would live under strict restrictions for decades. As part of his sentence, Josh was ordered to register as a sex offender, barred from unsupervised contact with minors, including his own children, and prohibited from accessing internet-capable devices without monitoring. He was also required to participate in mandatory sex offender treatment programs. The severity of these restrictions reflected the seriousness of his crimes. Prosecutors and Homeland Security officials made public statements emphasizing that the material Duggar had accessed represented the exploitation of some of the most vulnerable victims imaginable. For them, this case wasn't just about Josh Duggar, it was about accountability for anyone who fuels the demand for such horrific content. The appeals. True to form, Josh did not accept the outcome quietly. His legal team immediately filed appeals, challenging the admissibility of evidence and arguing that the court had erred in allowing references to his past conduct. They attempted to exclude the molestation history from influencing the jury, claiming it unfairly prejudiced the case. In 2023, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld his conviction, rejecting his claims. His lawyers then petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to review the case, hoping for a chance to overturn the verdict. But on June 24, 2024, the Supreme Court declined to hear it, leaving the conviction intact. With that, Josh's last formal path for appeal was closed. Life in prison. As of 2025, Josh Duggar remains incarcerated in federal custody, serving his sentence with years still left before any possibility of release. According to Bureau of Prisons records, his projected release date falls well into the 2030s. Even after release, he will live under 20 years of supervision, forever marked as a registered sex offender. For the Duggar family, the fallout has been irreversible. The scandals of 2015 and 2017 may have cracked their public image, but Josh's conviction in 2021 shattered it completely. The once celebrated family brand of faith and purity has been replaced with headlines about secrecy, hypocrisy, and crimes that can never be erased. The final collapse. The arrest and conviction of Josh Duggar represented not only the end of his personal life as a public figure, but also the symbolic end of the Duggar empire. TLC had long since distanced itself from the family, but the conviction ensured there would be no return, no rebranding, no redemption in the eyes of the public. From reality TV stardom to federal prison, Josh Duggar's downfall is one of the most dramatic and disturbing collapses in modern television history. It began with hidden secrets, continued with lawsuits and scandals, and ended in a courtroom where jurors declared what so many already believed, that behind the Duggar family's image of purity lay a story of darkness that could no longer be hidden. The end of the Duggar empire. The lawsuits, scandals, and criminal convictions didn't just end 19 kids and counting. They destroyed the Duggar family's reputation entirely. What began as a portrait of faith and family values ended in a saga of secrecy, betrayal, and legal battles. The sisters who once smiled on camera were forced to become plaintiffs in federal court. The son, once positioned as a leader of conservative Christian values, is now a convicted felon serving time in prison. For TLC, there was no way to continue. What had once been marketed as wholesome entertainment had become a chilling reminder of how image can hide reality. The Duggar lawsuits are a cautionary tale. They show how secrets, when buried, eventually resurface. And when they do, they carry consequences not just for one individual, but for an entire family empire. What do you think about the lawsuits that brought down the Duggars? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden truths behind the headlines.